Mark Reynolds thought a quiet suburb in Colorado would offer peace. But Hawthorne Ridge had other plans. The smell of waffles and burnt coffee filled the kitchen as Mark sat at the table, glasses perched low on his nose, scanning the morning edition of the Colorado Springs Gazette. Outside, a pair of robins chirped lazily on the backyard fence while sunlight filtered through the blinds in clean, straight lines. Lena was already outside, crouched beside the back porch with a small toolbox and a level in hand. She didn't say much when she worked. She just fixed things before they ever became problems. They had moved into Hawthorne Ridge barely 2 weeks earlier. The flyer that came in the welcome packet had promised security, serenity, and neighborly order. Lena had looked at the fine print, then raised an eyebrow. That usually means someone's watching. Still, Mark liked the neighborhood's appearance: quiet streets, freshly cut grass, the distant hum of sprinklers. The houses, though a little too uniform for his taste, were well maintained. Their property, a modest 2-story colonial on Aspen Loop, had a wraparound porch that Lena immediately claimed as her morning training ground. She didn't run laps anymore, but she did pace methodically while drinking her tea. That first week, Mark found a favorite spot just down the road, Tina's Diner, a corner cafe where the coffee was strong and the waitstaff knew everyone's name, including his by the third visit. It was there, over a plate of over-easy eggs and wheat toast, that he met Jim Harper. Jim was the kind of neighbor who didn't need an introduction. His presence explained itself: grizzled, polite, and usually in some variation of an old Army windbreaker. That morning Jim had nodded toward Mark's house with a grunt. "You new in the blue colonial?" "Yeah," Mark replied. "Moved in 2 weeks ago." Jim sipped his coffee, then said, "They don't like flags around here, or jeeps, or opinions." Mark blinked. "Flags?" "American ones. Had mine hanging since '78. Got a warning last month about unapproved banner display." Said it clashed with the neutral color palette. Back home, Lena parked her matte black Jeep, a beast of a machine with scuffed wheels and a proud bumper sticker that read, "Once silent, always aware." It rested with its front tires just grazing the line between concrete and lawn. The following morning, a neatly folded citation lay under the wiper blade. Violation code 14.3.2. Visual disruption. Vehicle appearance inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. Mark chuckled when he read it. Lena didn't. She folded it once, scanned it silently, and slipped it into a manila folder labeled Hawthorne Docs on the kitchen counter. That afternoon, the HOA president herself showed up. Karinette Withers looked as though she'd stepped straight out of a pastel catalog. Her hair was neat, her sweater set lavender, and her shoes spotless despite the gravel. She arrived with a clipboard and the kind of practiced smile that never quite reached the eyes. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said without preamble, glancing at Lena's Jeep like it was leaking oil onto the neighborhood's soul. Just a friendly reminder. Community harmony starts with cohesion. Lena didn't blink. "We're parked within the boundary." "Well, yes," Karinette admitted, adjusting her clip-on badge. "But the presence of a military-style vehicle can sometimes send an unintended message. And we all know how quickly impressions form, don't we?" Lena wiped her hands on her jeans. "Let me know when freedom becomes non-compliant." Karinette stiffened but offered a tight nod, as though she'd just lost a round she hadn't realized was a contest. She turned without a word and retreated down the walkway, her clipboard swinging like a scabbard. Later that evening, Mark wandered into the garage to grab a flashlight and found Lena standing on a step stool, pulling thin white cables up through the ceiling hatch. Her expression was calm, efficient, like someone setting up a new router, except there was no modem, no box, no installation guide. He leaned against the doorframe. "Monitoring?" She didn't look down. "Understanding," she answered. Then she slipped the last cable through the ceiling and pulled the hatch shut behind her. They came with matching polos, fake badges, and clipboards, but walked like soldiers on patrol. At first, Mark thought the group of men walking down Hawthorne Loop might have been from a security company until he caught the patches on their shirts. CED in bold white letters. Civil Enforcement Division, it read underneath. Not police, not military. Just a handful of middle-aged men in tactical cargo pants and hiking boots, striding past flower beds like they expected sniper fire from behind a mailbox. The heat had settled into the neighborhood like a slow exhale. Late June in Colorado Springs could be generous or cruel, and this week it leaned cruel. High 90s, windless, the kind of weather that made the smell of fresh mulch and grill grease hang heavy. As temperatures rose, so did the unease. Signs had started going up near the HOA bulletin board by the clubhouse. Community standards will be visually audited weekly. Another read, Exterior aesthetic checks scheduled block by block. The font was formal, the wording vague. Lena read them all without comment, then circled a few phrases in red marker and pinned the notices beside her folder stack in the hallway. Mark returned from Tina's diner one morning to find two of the officers crouching near their porch, filming the flower beds. One had a clipboard tucked under his arm, the other a bulky flashlight strapped across his thigh like a sidearm. When he asked what they were doing, the one with the clipboard responded, "Visual calibration for compliance," then scribbled something and walked off. "They're not real enforcement," Mark muttered as he recounted the scene to Lena that evening. "No," Lena agreed, "but they think they are. And that's more dangerous." A few days later, Jim Harper's flag disappeared. Not torn or vandalized, just removed. The pole was still bolted to the garage, but the flag itself was gone. Jim didn't say anything for a while. He just sat on his porch, radio humming faintly beside him, staring across the street with a tight jaw. Lena crossed over the next morning with a folded piece of cloth and a pack of new mounting clips. "Found this in the HOA's side lot near the dumpster," she said. Jim blinked once, then took the flag from her hands. "No one's ever brought it back before." Lena only shrugged. "We all have our lines." The same week, a family 2 houses down received a citation for unauthorized surface markings. Their daughter, maybe 5, maybe 6, had drawn a unicorn with pink chalk on the sidewalk in front of their lawn. The drawing had washed away in the rain, but someone had snapped a photo before it faded. A warning was taped to their door with a grainy black and white image attached. The parents didn't fight it. They just stopped speaking to anyone for a while. Lena, meanwhile, had begun walking longer routes in the early evenings. She passed home slowly, sometimes pausing to greet an elderly couple watering their garden or to wave at children riding bikes. Mark noticed she never took the same path twice and always wore the same pair of trail shoes, lightweight, no print. She left at roughly the same time every night, earbuds in, but the music was off. He'd checked once, just out of curiosity. Her phone screen had been on the camera app. By the end of the week, she had labeled folders lined up in the hallway cabinet. Violations, fabrications, false authority. There was also a red binder with no label, just a series of tabs, color-coded and hand-numbered. One afternoon, Mark found a man near their front window. He wasn't looking in exactly, more like pretending to inspect the edge of the porch while clearly angling his phone toward the blinds. Lena stepped outside with a glass of water in one hand and a hand towel in the other. She didn't raise her voice. She just stood on the porch and said, "Want to test your pepper spray against a veteran?" The man turned so fast he dropped his clipboard. He scooped it up and walked away at a pace that hovered between a retreat and a jog. That night, Mark found himself unable to sleep. The ceiling fan turned in slow circles above their bed, and Lena had already gone downstairs. He wandered through the dark hallway and followed the faint hum of electronics toward the utility closet under the stairs. The door wasn't locked. Inside was a folding table, a stack of printed documents, and a map of Hawthorne Ridge taped to the wall with pins marking intersections, camera lines, and red squares labeled known agents. There were timestamps printed from doorbell cam screenshots, cropped images of citation notices, and a list of HOA board members with personal notes scribbled in pencil. Lena was crouched by the far end, adjusting a motion sensor connected to a small laptop. Mark blinked. "What is this?" She looked over her shoulder, her voice calm as ever. "Preparation," Lena said. "Most people host barbecues for fun. Lena hosts hers to expose a regime." The smell of grilled meat mixed with freshly cut grass and the soft scent of charcoal drifted down Aspen Loop like a quiet invitation. It was the 4th of July, and for most households in Hawthorne Ridge, that meant flags, folding chairs, and the occasional burst of patriotic music from a Bluetooth speaker. For the Reynolds household, it meant something far more calculated. By midday, their backyard had transformed into a Norman Rockwell postcard. Kids chasing each other with red, white, and blue streamers, neighbors balancing paper plates, and Jim Harper reclining in a folding chair with his old Army cap in his lap. He hadn't worn it since his retirement party in '89, but today it rested in his hands like something sacred. Lena had insisted he bring it. The grill hissed as Mark flipped a row of burgers, glancing over the fence every few minutes. He didn't know exactly what to expect, only that Lena had been unusually still that morning, her expression somewhere between satisfaction and anticipation. She'd made a single change to their usual setup. She parked her matte black Jeep right out front, perfectly centered beneath the HOA sign that read, "Aesthetic compliance is a civic duty." A small American flag fluttered from its windshield like punctuation. The first neighbor to arrive brought lemonade. The second brought homemade pie. The third brought a quiet glance at the Jeep and a comment under his breath. "She's bold." By 1 o'clock, a soft buzz had taken hold of the party, not from the beer, but from the quiet tension rippling under each conversation. People smiled too tightly, laughed a little too high. A few of them had citations folded in their pockets. Mark had seen it. One woman carried hers like a receipt she couldn't quite throw away. Lena drifted from group to group, a pitcher of juice in one hand, a towel over her shoulder. She handed juice boxes to kids, refilled plastic cups, and paused only to pat Jim on the shoulder or point someone toward the restroom. She didn't mention rules. She didn't need to. Around 2:30, the HOA enforcers arrived. 3 of them this time, same black polos, same khaki cargo pants, same grim expressions. One held a clipboard. Another had a body cam strapped to his chest. The third, shorter, stockier, wore mirrored sunglasses and a look of deep personal offense. They approached slowly, stopping just before the grill. Mark could smell their cologne over the charcoal. The sunglasses guy gestured toward the Jeep. "This vehicle is in direct violation of Greenbrier Regulation 14.2.5, he announced, loud enough for the nearest 10 guests to hear. Lena turned, looked at the Jeep, then back at him. "Which part?" she said. "The freedom or the horsepower?" That pulled a chuckle from someone near the potato salad. Sunglasses guy didn't laugh. He reached into his vest and pulled out a laminated warning card, holding it like a warrant. "This is your final notification. Failure to relocate this non-compliant vehicle will result in forced removal by the authority granted to the Greenbrier HOA Board and its appointed Civil Enforcement Task Force." Lena handed a juice box to a child, wiped her hands on her jeans, and stepped in front of the Jeep. "You want to move it," she said. "You'll have to go through me." A hush rippled across the backyard. Jim stopped chewing. Someone lowered their phone. Mark felt his grip tighten around the spatula. He looked to Lena, but she wasn't tense. She stood the way she always did, like gravity worked differently for her. The enforcer with the citation pad hesitated, The one with the body cam stepped forward, angling the lens. Sunglasses guy didn't wait. He reached for his taser. "You are interfering with a lawful citation process," he said. "Step aside, or we will use non-lethal force to neutralize the threat to community order." Mark barely registered the words before the crackle. The taser fired. Lena dropped. The yard froze. A woman gasped. A paper plate hit the grass. Children clung to their parents, silent. Even the birds seemed to stop. Then, slowly, one by one, red dots appeared. They shimmered against polo shirts, glided up arms and across chests. Controlled, steady, no motion. Just silent beams of judgment from angles no one could trace. From the hedges, from a second-story window, from behind the corner fence. And then Lena's team emerged, calm, silent, aimed. The moment the taser fired, Lena didn't panic. She pivoted. She dropped like a marionette with cut strings, but there was no gasp, no cry, just a dull thud as her shoulder met the grass. For one sickening second, no one moved. The heat of the late afternoon pressed in close, heavy and unbreathable. Mark's knees gave slightly beneath him as he stared, spatula still in hand, unmoving. A child whimpered near the cooler. The enforcer in sunglasses lowered the taser, blinking like he wasn't sure what he'd just done. Then the dots appeared. Red, silent, sharp as razors. They flickered into existence one by one, glowing on black polo shirts, climbing up arms, catching on jawlines. From the hedges, the rooftop, the neighbor's porch rail. They painted the HOA enforcers in perfect synchrony, without a single word spoken. Mark's heart thudded. Lena pushed herself up with one arm, slowly, deliberately. She didn't groan. She didn't shake. She brushed off her pants, then sat upright and looked down at the wires that still trailed from her shirt like abandoned vines. "That shot was low and left," she said. "You really need to recalibrate." A murmur rippled through the crowd. It was disbelief first, then something else, awareness. One by one, phones came out. Mark saw a hand rise to record near the drink table. Another near the grill. Jim had stood, hat off, held respectfully against his chest. Sunglasses guy took one step back. His mouth opened, but no sound came. One of his teammates, clipboard in hand, turned slightly, looking for a way out. The man with the body cam had stopped filming entirely. No one dared move further. That's when Lena's team emerged. They didn't bark commands. They didn't charge. They just stepped into view, 5 in total, spaced perfectly across the yard. One stood by the gate, another near the fence, one just outside the garage. A fourth stood by the grill, and the last emerged from behind the garden shed. None wore uniforms, no matching anything, just solid colors, calm eyes, and the posture of people who had done this before. Mark's breath finally returned. Lena stood fully now, her expression unreadable. She reached into her back pocket and retrieved a folded envelope. Her fingers brushed the edge once before she turned toward the sidewalk, where a tall man in a navy suit had just stepped past the HOA sign. He carried no weapons, no badge on his lapel. But his voice cut through the tension like a whistle. "Agent Walker, Department of Justice, Office of Civil Enforcement." The yard fell even quieter. He stepped beside Lena, facing the enforcers without raising his voice. "We've been monitoring the HOA operations in Hawthorne Ridge for several months. Today's incident confirms sufficient grounds for escalation." Sunglasses guy stammered. This is a private association." Walker held up a hand. "Your association charter expired 14 months ago. Any authority claimed after that point is not only void, it's fraudulent, including citations, fines, and any formed enforcement entities." He glanced at the body cam on the enforcer's chest. "And impersonation of law enforcement carries federal weight. I suggest you keep still." The man didn't argue. Lena's teammates relaxed their stance, but the red dots remained for a moment longer. Then, with a slight nod from Lena, they turned off in near unison. A neighbor near the cornhole board started clapping, awkward at first, almost apologetic. But it spread. A second, then a third. It wasn't wild applause, more like a slow wave of relief. Mark looked to Jim, who hadn't moved, still holding his cap, but now with his eyes closed for a long breath. Karinette arrived minutes later. She swept onto the lawn with a clipboard under one arm and a frown firmly in place. Mark noticed she was wearing the same lavender sweater set from her last inspection. It hadn't wrinkled. She walked as if she were interrupting a minor inconvenience, not stepping into the center of her administration's collapse. Before she could speak, Agent Walker turned to her. "Ma'am, you are the acting president of the HOA?" "I am," she replied, lifting her chin, "but this is not your jurisdiction." "Actually it is," he cut in smoothly. "You authorized the formation of the Civil Enforcement Task Force, correct?" She glanced at the now disarmed enforcers, eyes flicking between them like they might still protect her. "Yes," she said carefully, "then you are responsible for their actions." Mark wasn't sure if she paled or if the sun shifted. Either way, the color drained from her expression. Walker stepped closer. "You'll need to come with us for questioning regarding unlawful enforcement, expired charter activity, and potential fraud." Before Karinette could answer, Walker turned to Lena. "Do you have the file?" Lena handed him the sealed folder without a word. "Everything you need," she said. For years, Karinette ruled with laminated threats and garden patrols. Now her crown had burned to paper ash. The signs came down first. By Tuesday morning, laminated warnings about porch light lumens and acceptable bird feeder color palettes vanished from every stop sign and mailbox. Some fluttered in the breeze as they were yanked off, others were peeled slowly, as if the paper itself resisted leaving. In their place, a single notice, printed in black and white DOJ letterhead, had been stapled to the bulletin board near the clubhouse. Effective immediately, the Hawthorne Ridge Homeowners Association is under federal investigation. All enforcement activities are suspended. Previously collected fines are null and void pending review. A second line followed, simple and clear. Residents are advised to retain personal documentation and refrain from compliance with any further directives until a legal charter is reestablished. The neighborhood didn't cheer. Not yet. People needed time to unlearn fear. Mark sat beside Jim at Tina's diner the next morning, the two of them nursing lukewarm mugs of coffee as the small TV above the counter cycled through local headlines. The words Hawthorne Ridge appeared more than once. A blurry screenshot showed Lena in the background of a DOJ press conference, standing quietly as Agent Walker read from a file. Jim didn't say much at first, just took off his cap, turned it over in his hands. "She beat them," he muttered. Mark watched the screen. "She didn't fight them," he said. "She outlasted them." By Thursday, the community had started talking again, not just hellos and neighborly waves, but real conversations. Doors once shut tight with drawn blinds were now opened. Folding chairs appeared in driveways. A few kids played hopscotch where sidewalk chalk had once been found. Someone brought out a cooler and passed out bottled water in the shade. Karinette had been seen only once since the 4th, leaving the HOA office with her clipboard pressed flat against her chest and her trademark cardigan buttoned all the way to the top. She didn't look at anyone, not with scorn, not with apology. Just eyes forward, shoulders back, as if posture alone could hold dignity together. No one stopped her, but no one stepped aside either. The office she'd occupied was now locked, tagged with red tape and a printed sign that read, "Federal Review, in progress." The garden outside, once known as Harmony Park, had become a gathering space. No enforcement agents, no HOA patrols, just people. That Friday, Mark and Lena helped carry 3 folding tables from their garage to the garden area. Jim showed up with a folding chair of his own and a stack of old photographs. Vietnam, mostly. He laid them out carefully, like they were still sacred, still warm. Lena didn't speak during the first half of the meeting. She handed out water bottles, adjusted umbrellas to block the sun, and helped a neighbor plug in a portable speaker for light music. It was the first community meeting not called by an HOA president in nearly 8 years. No gavel, no roll call, just people with questions and enough chairs to sit together. A woman stood to tell how she was fined for using wind chimes that rang in non-standard tonal intervals. A man followed with a story about being warned for growing tomatoes too close to the curb. Then Jim, voice clear but slow, shared the story of his tribute plaque, a small wooden board nailed under his front window with the names of 3 men he'd served with in 1969. Carinette had cited him for unauthorized signage. He looked at Lena. She had it reinstated, quietly, never told anyone. A silence fell across the group, not heavy, just respectful. Then someone said what everyone else was thinking. She doesn't need to talk. We already heard her. By Saturday, the sign above the old HOA garden had been removed. In its place, a hand-painted wooden plaque now read, Veterans Corner. Mark watched as Jim stood before it, his cap back on, his hand hovering for a moment before placing a single flag into the soil nearby. Later that day, a new vote was called, not by mandate, but by motion. Someone stood and suggested that the community needed a stabilizing voice to guide them through the restructuring. Someone familiar, someone who had already earned their trust. Jim rose slowly, looked around at the gathered circle, and cleared his throat. I nominate Lena Reynolds for HOA president. The crowd was still for a breath. Then someone nodded. Then another. Hands rose. Mark watched from the edge of the group, arms crossed, eyes steady. Lena didn't speak. She didn't even look surprised. But she met Jim's gaze, then Mark's. And that was answer enough. Lena didn't want power, but when given the gavel, she rewrote the rules with 3 words. No more fear. The coffee urn hissed softly in the corner of Hawthorne Ridge Community Hall, filling the room with the scent of warm grounds and something like possibility. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching in the dust and bathing the wooden floors in soft gold. Folding chairs creaked as neighbors shifted, murmured, and waited. It was mid-August. The flags were back on porches, not enforced, not uniform, just present. And this time nobody wrote citations about their angle or placement. Mark sat near the back, hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup, watching Lena at the front of the room. She wore no badge, no blazer, just a navy shirt, her hair pulled back, and that quiet stillness that made people pay attention without being told to. She didn't start with a speech. She didn't clear her throat or tap the mic. Instead, she walked to the podium, reached under it, and held up a thick white binder, the old HOA rulebook. Laminated tabs still fluttered at the edges, like protest. Then she dropped it flat into the shred bin beside her. The sound was quiet, satisfying, like paper giving up its weight. Without waiting, she opened a new folder and placed a single page on the podium. This is the new charter, she said, voice calm but firm. 3 principles: respect, transparency, trust. That's it. She looked around the room, not commanding, just connecting. No one on the board will issue citations. No one will patrol with vests. No fines. No threats. If something bothers you, you talk to your neighbor, like grown-ups, like community. There was a pause. Then soft applause. Not thunderous, not triumphant, just steady. Someone asked if she would accept the standard HOA president's stipend. Lena shook her head. I don't want your money. I don't want your property rights. I want your cooperation. It was Jim who stood next. His cap was crisp today, his spine straight. He suggested the garden committee be reinstated, not as an HOA subdivision, but as volunteers. A few others offered to organize a school supply drive. Someone else volunteered to repaint the park benches. The list grew naturally, no clipboard needed. By the time the meeting was halfway through, the atmosphere had changed. People weren't speaking from fear or bitterness. They were building. Mark leaned back in his chair, content to observe. This was Lena's moment, even if she didn't seem to think of it that way. Toward the end, she lifted the gavel that had sat untouched on the edge of the podium. She held it for a beat. Then she turned and handed it to a woman sitting beside her, a retired librarian named Doreen, who'd been quietly organizing community cookouts for years. "No leader should hold the gavel for long," Lena said. "Rotate it, share it, keep each other honest." Before the applause could begin, Lena had already stepped down, slipping toward the side exit with Mark quietly following. No parade, no spotlight. Just the click of the door behind them. They sat together on their porch an hour later, sipping black coffee. The air smelled of pine and early sunlight. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Across the street, a group of kids had begun to chalk up the sidewalk again. Rainbows, fish, abstract stars, and something that might have been a dog or a bear with a crown. One little girl toddled up to the edge of Lena's walkway, chalk clutched tightly in her hand. "Can I draw here too?" she asked. "On your sidewalk?" Lena knelt beside her. "Only if I can draw the second unicorn."